they're actually here, the new guys for interview. So you can sit down, feel like the vibe of a talk show, and you can say hello to that like weird looking camera.
Hello.
Hello, hello. People are like engaging online. Let me open the chat.
Hello.
How's it going?
Fine.
Fine. Congratulations on the talk. Was good stuff.
Thank
Yeah, you asked me if people had questions online, and then we were like, oh, we have a spot for an interview because people had questions.
Yeah, because we thought we didn't want to leave them out in the dark and say maybe there was something in the chats, and we weren't there to sort of elaborate on that.
Yeah.
So that will be a perfect time to sort of take them.
Yeah. How are you feeling?
Oh, relaxed.
Second day is good.
Yeah, second day is good.
The talk is delivered, then you're like,
chill.
Yeah, it's always a bit different up till, and then just after it's like, okay, this is free.
Yeah. Are you enjoying the event?
Very much.
Yeah.
Very much.
Cool. Awesome. So
Starting off to see a shoe being modeled in real time. That just I love that.
That was cool, huh?
I love that.
That was cool. I kind of want to do it.
Yeah.
They should do like a workshop with all the shoes stuff. That'd be awesome. Anyways, let me pull up the questions that we wrote down, and these are really interesting questions. And of course, for anyone watching online, you can send more questions if we can. We'll just pull them in. But anyways, okay. So, first question: do you think that by blending design and code, you can add limitations or have a bad effect on your creativity?
I think in the beginning there will be. Sometimes we draw a diagram, the valley of sort of disappointment from when you start beginning to code. You can see your aesthetic quality will just
plummet.
And you're looking at this circle, and it's all very. It's not what I do when I do Illustrator. It's not what I do when I'm doing physical stuff. So it's a different ball game, but you're sort of rewiring yourself in order to think in a new way. And if that sort of takes on, you can start seeing editing to your existing skill sets. So you will see a huge drop in your creativity and your aesthetic quality. But you need to sort of stay onto it and start adding it. Maybe start by something like doing textures, because textures are easily integratable into Illustrator or InDesign, like backdrops, and then you can see that you actually can gain something from the code part. So that may be a segue into putting more.
I'd say it's probably true for blending coding and design as a skill, as with any other skill, and it takes practice.
Yeah.
It's a skill you have to acquire, and it's something you have to learn, and you can revert back to this whole like Karate Kid, wax on, wax off metaphor. You just gotta throw yourself into it, get your hands dirty, writing some code, do that on a daily basis, keep it up, and I'm sure the initial threshold that you need to pass to just grasp the basic concepts of what you can do with code. That is not that, it's not that hard to come over. But as soon as you pass that, you can kind of like unfold a whole new way of approaching design. So yeah, I agree with Karsten. Initially, you might experience this little plummet and a drop in your creativity, but as soon as you regain control, practice, you can take it from there.
I think like what you said is very important, where like you can also take it one step at a time, because when you take in these smaller projects, it's easier to manage them, because sometimes you can get really bold and try like, I'm gonna do a procedural something, and then it gets really complicated. But in my world, like in game development, like it's much better for when you're learning how to code, like to make games. It's always good to just start making like these little like Tetris, then like a labyrinth game, and then a space shooter, and then you keep evolving, then you get used to it, because it doesn't get a lot into the creativity. It's just like reproducing to practice, if that makes sense.
I might add that a lot of these communities on Discord, or the P5 community, we have several people doing weekly streams where they're talking about creative coding. They put out these weekly challenges, usually with a little topic that is open for interpretation. And then people can just submit whatever they feel like. And, some do very elaborate sketches, some do very basic stuff. But, if you need some kind of like spark to kick things off, try to look into some of these weekly challenges.
Yeah, that's
and I actually, I have a saying for the students, and it's sort of opposite of what they might expect when I say, hey, try to be unambitious. Don't try to sort of say, okay, I will do this and look at that, that's great. Try to sort of get it to a place where you can overcome it or cope with it, and have fun with it. It's more a good thing to find a place when you can have fun learning how to code, instead of saying, oh, it will be great if I one day could do this. Of course, you should aspire for that at some point, but make the journey fun.
Yeah.
And you do that with these small crazy experiments.
Yeah.
And not productive stuff.
I totally agree with that. That's a really good answer. Computer, there you go. I have more questions from the audience, and this was a really interesting one. I actually remember this one from yesterday because I was like hanging out with people, and I remember this question. Really interesting one. You ready?
Yeah.
I hope the answer will be interesting too.
Do you think that the evolution and necessity of code in the modern world creates pressure on designers that choose not to learn it? Can a designer just say no without feeling the pressure of the modern world?
Yeah, I would say yes. Yes, you can say no.
Yes, you can say no.
Absolutely, totally, you can say no. You just got to be aware that by turning your back on code, you will put yourself in a position where you will not have access to some of the things that are happening on digital media. But don't fret, because not all designers need to be programmers. That is a totally distinct job description. People enter university and study computer science for like 5, 6, 7 years. So my goal, and Karsten's goal as well, is not to make all designers be programmers. We're talking a bit about this programming tourist notion that Fatma Samiri coined. And I'm thinking that designers should just learn enough code to get by. And they can learn that either as some sort of like a concrete activity where they're sitting down, writing code, churning out a lot of lines of code and doing syntax and stuff and, building things. But you can easily learn to think computationally as well. We have this whole idea, I think it was Janet Wing at some point back in, 10, 15 years ago, she coined this term of computational thinking. So the ability, and I believe even the Vlad yesterday was pointing to this as well in the McKinsey report, saying that computational thinking and the ability to sit down and just even mentally try to construct a series of procedures that you want, or steps to formalize what you're doing as a designer, that is something that you could do without even writing one line of code. So, weapon of choice. If you want to engage with code, you can do that. But of course, if you want to just understand code on a more like superficial or meta level, you can do that as well.
Yeah, and to add to that, you'll say every now and then we meet these shifts in paradigm. So there was a time before Photoshop and after Photoshop, but if you weren't on that wagon, you were sort of limited to do something else. Either you were doing that or you are not doing that, but there are plenty of ways to express yourself. There are other means to get to sort of a design product. But again, at some point I see that climbing through this evolution of design, there is sort of a glass ceiling, because thinking in code is so fundamental for the expressiveness of dynamic media. So if you're not into even computational thinking on how I tend to call it material learning of the material. You know how a paper folds, you know how a paper reacts, so then you can print off it and make a emballage and so on. But knowing what code does for you, you need to at least get into that. And for most of you, you have plenty of years to do design. So I normally say you should do this till you are 70. Hey, yeah, but maybe you have 30, 40, or 50 years. So has that happened a lot or a little in the past 10 years? Will it happen more and less? And you can see, where are you? And so it's not that you should be able to code tomorrow, but maybe you should just be curious about it. Start getting an interest in it. Start observing and absorb places where they discuss it and showcase it, so you sort of get a feeling and get a spirit of it.
Yeah. Opening your mind.
Yeah, opening your mind, and then maybe the next step will be not by force say, I have to, otherwise I'm lost. But you might just want to do that.
Yeah, it's like the understanding of the medium.
Yeah.
Right? Because, every metaphor I'll make is just for game development because that's my world. But it's always like this, where if you're in one area, if you can at least understand what is possible in the others, you don't need to be the specialist on like audio, the specialist programmer, and everything. But if you have an idea, you can design much better because after all, it's just like a way to communicate, a way to present, to draw, to do things. And once you know that, you know what's possible. Like you were saying, if I have a paper, I know how to. I know that it's possible to fold it. I might not be the one folding it.
No.
Right, but you know it's there. And so with code, it's like I can make procedural stuff. Like that's a thing. Then I can design. And then maybe someone will do it for me.
Yeah. And let developers be developers, because we're not trying to say that you should be very good at coding. Of course, someone might get sparked by a holy light and say, okay, now I'm going all the way. And actually, it can be good for someone to hold back a bit on that one, because going into that focus, it gets more systematic for people. And if they can't get past that step, sort of use it as a tool for their own means, they get trapped in these systems, and they can make a linear movement or maybe a simple sine wave. So if you can't get beyond that, that will actually be a limit for them. So then it's good to know what's possible and just put their own, I can't do it, but I know it's possible way of thinking, and then talk to developers and do that in collaboration.
It's all about understanding the affordances of code, basically.
Yeah.
And to that respect, if I might just do a little promotion, not of myself, but I really want to encourage all of you who want to get a little bit more knowledge about the affordances of code and how we arrived at where we are today. Either to read, I know John Mader wrote recently this very great book, How to Speak Machine. That is, of course, about the nuts and bolts about programming, but it's also more about the ethical stuff. How does it impact society? How do you work with code in a way that extends beyond actually just writing syntax? You have an impact in what you do or choose not to do if you don't want to engage in learning how to code. You've got to understand that as well. So I want to highlight that book as something.
And I think also the last book we showed, Code as a Creative Medium. Just that's very inspiring by Go on 11 and Take a Brain. Because there's no code in the book, so it's a book about code as a creative medium, but without no code in. So that may make it a little more long lasting. But there are very interesting interviews to sort of get your head around why that could be both inspiring and important in the future. Because
Awesome.
I think it won't go away anytime soon.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Because I'm a
Okay, we
programmer
agree.
myself. We all agree. There's no room for disagreement
No.
here. Actually, speaking of resources, you kind of answered that, but there was one question saying, which one resource would you recommend for learning next to a full-time job, and which projects would be a good starting point?
Resources to learn code or to just get started with.
I should say a way, at least for visually inclined people, for designers.
Yeah.
I think processing is a great fundamental approach to it. It's a closed system. You download the program, you can click run, and then it runs. And it has this sketch-like approach, and the commands in it are modeled for designers to get something up and be very interactive with it. And that goes with it has to be fun part. And as soon as you can see that it reacts on the mouse movement and it draws trails or whatever, make patterns for you, you sort of get satisfied by that in a way than when you learn JavaScript or C# or whatever. Unity is also, of course, an interesting platform, but that's a bit more complex. So this pure code environment, and it's very helpful and have a low entry barrier. So I think that will be a good start to have fun with it. And when you're having fun with it, you will learn about loops and functions and all that important stuff that is similar to all of the products.
But I guess it kind of depends on where you want to end up, because if you want to do professional development of some of these things, at one point you're going to hit the limitations of what is possible within processing. Essentially, processing is just a wrapper around the Java engine, and you can easily push a lot of pixels around. But at one point, you will start to experience some of the the flaws of processing. There's several other tools that you can engage with. I mean, Open Frameworks being one of them. It's based on C, so it's a lot faster. Arguably, it's a little more complex to get started with. Requires you to install like Xcode or some sort of like a similar development environment. But for like total noobs, I would definitely also recommend processing. Processing is made with this like philosophy of low threshold, wide walls, and high ceiling, meaning that low threshold, it should be easy to get into. Wide walls is actually like, there's a lot of things you can do. For example, processing doesn't contain any pre-built graphical user interface library. That in turn kind of like engages you in thinking a bit about more, how can you create alternative interfaces? You don't just drag and drop a bunch of components. I mean, you got to do some thinking and how do you want people to engage with the things that you're programming. And the last one, the high ceiling, is that it's meant to be scalable up until a certain point. I mean, if you're a designer and you're sitting there, like Sander Sturing in the case that I showed yesterday from the Amsterdam Sinfonietta, he's doing creative coding at Studio Dumbar, and he's using processing. And here he's building these tools for like just Studio Dumbar to use. So they don't need to be polished, they don't need to be stress test. They don't need to be like industrial grade for a lot of users to use. It's just very rudimentary, very crude, and it's for him to use, and that's it. So for his purpose, processing is just fine. But if you plan on making stuff that needs to go out and be a little bit more robust or running faster, or you've got to look beyond processing.
Yeah, but also my idea with starting with processing is that it could be a segue to P5.js, because the commands are almost similar, but the P5.js is on the JavaScript platform. So learning about processing in this sandbox creative environment, and then have it as a segue over to P5.js, then you will get familiar with the JavaScript syntax, and that will actually sort of open up the world to JavaScript and the more boring tutorials in JavaScript, because then you have your confidence and you have your core skills in programming at the right place, so you don't get scared off by all these tutorials that may not be that inspiring, but you have the whole visual background from P5, so you can easily start looking and designing with that. So I think that's a route around to get to JavaScript, and then the web is open for you because that's the browser language.
Then the internet is just...
Then the numbers start to...
Matrix. It's funny because
I can do this.
I started with processing as well, which is exactly the same path. We're like this place where I studied code. It was first processing and a segue to P5.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was definitely one of those designers that never thought I was going to be able to code. And then with that, very simple tool was processing. Just opened my eyes a little bit. And then it was a transition to C# because of Unity and all.
Yeah.
So it was like mind-blowing. But I guess for people online, where do they learn processing if they just download processing?
Well, processing website has excellent resources. It's just recently been redesigned to have this brand spanking new identity that has actually been made by Rune Madsen and Martin Bravo from Design Systems International. They're here at the conference as well, giving this workshop at 1 today. But they've kindly donated some of their time to redesign the processing website. So I'm pretty sure that if you access the processing website, you can find a whole section dedicated to tutorials, trying to ease you into writing some simple programs. There's some of these like pre-written examples that you can just download and look through and try to understand. Hello.processing.org is a nice resource. It's not very large, but it's just really a small introduction by Daniel Schiffman to really, for people who haven't done any coding before, how to install processing, how to open it, and how to get started. And of course, there's lots of tutorials and resources. We made a little plug for Daniel Schiffman and his coding train, which is an excellent resource. He's really producing a lot of really high quality content for both beginners as well as advanced users. And around that, I know there's really like budding community of people doing all sorts of meetups. We have processing community days as like worldwide events, physical meetings, online meetings. I mean, if you just kind of like look, I believe that there's plenty of resources around the processing community to get you started.
Yeah, and I think that's the hello processing, because it's sort of in a web browser environment, and you can do it during lunchtime or whatever, and it's interactive, so you can engage with the video. That's normally not what you do when you're looking at a YouTube clip. You can sort of pause, but this is sort of, we're going to the next thing, and it sort of happens continuously or simultaneously. And then the shift, man, I know a lot of people who has got by just by looking at those playlists. Remember, it has to be the beginners, because there is a lot of advanced stuff on his coding train. But find the beginners playlist. That will be I would think that will be a good start.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let me just make sure that people aren't asking anything anymore in the live stream. Not as of right now, but cool. I'll give the time. I'll give the resource that you just mentioned. I'll make sure to put them like as links here in the chat. So don't worry about that. We'll figure it out. But yeah, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the day. And we'll talk more about code at some time. Yeah. Right?
We'll dive down. Good.
We gotta run, I guess, getting distracted by this guy doing this.
Someone is like,
yeah, nice meeting you.
Bye out there.
Yeah, cool.